also had like a subtitle there, which I found very funny. What we know so far with AR capitalized. Thank you. I had a slow clap. That's all I wanted for today. That's my talk. See you tonight. So Android XR, right? It got announced December 12, 2024. Who knew about it back then? Yeah, 2 people, same people, nice. And what obviously Google wants us to do is like have pictures of random people doing random things, swirling in 3D. Yeah, please have a look at my slides afterwards to see the actual blog post, or feel free to look it up right now. It was a very interesting one because it didn't go into the depth. And I like depth. I like to indulge myself into technology, and that's what I hope I can do today. Then, more than a month later, we had the Samsung Galaxy Unpacked. I think it was 1 minute. They were mentioning Android XR, saying like, yeah, Android XR exists. Next topic. And I think that's also very funny. I'm super curious to see where this goes. I hope this will be taking over the XR space, because I think we need a platform that runs everywhere, I would think. And then we had MKBHD having a YouTube video about it, where we actually saw for the first time the device. Importantly enough, it's that it's not a Vision Pro. That is like the title picture they had here for their XR talk, and they were going through like what are some of the features and how does this work and things. Also recommendation for the reader afterwards to just take a look at this YouTube video and see what they think. It was kind of nice to see the hardware in action because I have not seen a device, this device specifically, before, and I'm curious to see it again. If you also want to get your hands on one of the devices, there is actually the developer preview, and there is something on my screen that might work or not. I'm spoiling everything like I do. I wanted to talk about the Android XR Developer Bootcamp. That is a series that Google organizes where you can sign up under this link up there. And get into a workshop with Google about the new Android XR world, see how the hardware works and how you can program for it. So if you're looking at this page, you can sign up, and at some point they will come to a place near you, which obviously means London or Munich. Sadly, no Berlin. But you know, you come to the Berlin Droid in order to get as close as you can to a workshop like this. So thank you for that. If you don't have the time, the money to go to Munich or London, or will not get selected, you can also take the emulator, right? If you are using the developer preview that they also announced recently, you can actually run Android XR on an emulator and exploit some more. As you might have expected, it's a developer preview. For the preview, you need the Android Canary installed, and then from the Canary, you can install the emulator over the XR tab, as you see also on the slides right now. Don't be too confused about the 6-inch there. It is running the XR OS, and I'm going to go a bit more into the details as what is the emulator doing and how does it look. So you open the XR emulator and you see something like you have seen before, Android icons and some more controls on the side. Mostly you have the back navigation and stuff you know from the first top 3 icons from Android, but then you also have like a barrage of different icons where you can actually simulate moving in virtual space. So like you can move the camera around, you can rotate the camera, you can see through, which means you can enable the kind of, like you see it in the background of this image, right? This is a scene inside a room with some chairs. This simulates as if you would be seeing through into the reality. But then you can also disable it when you're disabling the see-through. Then you have a complete virtual environment where there are no tables, where this is something the OS controls, or actually you will be able to. I tried my hand on trying to capture this one, and once it starts playing, you see me clicking around and moving the screen. Don't worry too much about what you're seeing, but what you're seeing is essentially moving around in 3D space. This is simulating through the emulator as if you would be moving your head in the real reality. And in this case, done through your mouse and clicking the right options of the emulator. And as we like emulating things, we also emulate inside the emulator, because, you know, and in this case, I took the best gaming platform, which is obviously DOS, disk operating systems. I can only recommend this game here to the side. If you are German, you might remember Dunkle Schatten, which is a nice game for you to spot fascism in real life. Can only recommend it. But except for this one, you can also emulate DOS completely, right? So I used the DOSBox emulator here, Magic DOSBox to be named, and it just works out of box. This goes also for a lot of other apps, right? So this one is, for instance, using Chrome, again, running through the emulator. And inside Chrome, I now start a WebXR demonstration. And once I confirmed it, you will see that this just took over the whole XR, the whole Android XR headset, right? So like from a browser, I click a button and then I will be transformed into this reality with lots of boxes. And the 30 FPS are running on my M3 right now, emulated. So this is kind of nice. It's also kind of nice that it just transports me into a different environment by a click of a button. But I think the main purpose, or where Android XR or spatial computing can be successful, is not in games. It is in productivity measures. So what you're seeing here demonstrated is how I actually used a VNC client to, inside Android XR, to connect to my device. Right? So like this one mirrors essentially the screen into XR, and then I can hit a button and run, like for instance, Android Studio on my machine mirrored onto XR. And since this XR device is also connected to my phone, or sorry, to my machine, I can run new games, or I can run new apps that I just built through the connection on the device. Who got this, and was this complicated enough? So there's a hands up, thank you for that. I like this, so as you can see, the screen is hovering in space. I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, I can arrange it how I want to, and I can even put like the documentation next to it without needing a second screen or anything. Plus, since both of the devices are connected to the same machine, I can run things immediately on the XR device. So, like summarizing this one somehow, if it lets me, it is Android, right? It's Android with XR on it. I can run the default apps. Obviously, you should install F-Droid on it. Obviously, you should use Termux. And then you can also use all of the G apps that work nice and flawlessly. Interestingly enough, and we'll see it in the gotcha ones, there are some corner cases where, for instance, Netflix does not work because Netflix thinks that this is a different device. And if you want to start the app, it says, sorry, you can't use Netflix in spatial mode or at all on Android XR. But that's great. We love user interfaces, we love the user experience. But as I said in the start, I want to go down technical, right? I want to understand how can I actually use this myself. How can I use it with code? How can I program something? And what is the actual step needed to get the productivity from my current app into a virtual reality space? So I'm using the old extended reality space. Therefore, I started with a simple app. This is an app that searches blue sky for a specific term. Right? In this case, it looks on the side, it looks for cats with hats. And then I have a card view that has an image, that has a character icon, an avatar name, and some text to it. Like, I think that's pretty standard for things we are doing with Android. We have a UI that comes from data we are getting from the backend, we render it. And I wrote this app just for experimenting on the translation from the normal 2D content to the XR content. And it uses the general things we know, right? It uses flows, it uses VMs, it uses surprisingly Android. Good that I put this point here. It's just, you know, I use Kotlin X serialization. I have my data types defined as you would, plus making special case of like when the add protocol has a dollar symbol in it, I need to use a serial name. So Android stuff, I want to say, as we all are hopefully used to. And then I use retrofit on it to connect like the data models together to the servers. I call it, and I get my search results. And just for information, I don't need to authenticate or anything. The search endpoint for Blue Sky is just open to everyone. Yeah, and then I iterate through the sofAR. I obviously have way more data models here, and if you're interested, we can take a look at them later, but that's the general gist, right? So with all of this together, and then using asynchronous images from Coil, we have the app, essentially. Okay, so now we have a beautiful app with beautiful cats. How do we make it XR? What do we want to do, right? So I said like functionality is for me king, right? I think there's something like productivity involved with showing cats in 3D. So let us take everything we have and just create it for the card display, but show it as a cylinder around the user. And how complicated can this be, right? And if I'm speaking like this, it uses the same views, luckily. So like everything I've done in 2D, I can reuse in XR. I just need to show you a demo how this works. Again, it's the emulator, the app is installed. I open it, you see the default Android view. I click on search, we see the items we saw before. But now I click onto the get me into XR mode, and we immediately see a circle spinning up with the data coming from the VM. So also the VM is reused in XR. And then I hit the search button again, and since we are in XR, I just add more items to it, and can actually then also start moving into the sphere, into the cylinder, and see all of the beautiful data I wanted to see. Again, starting with the use case first, that is the use case I wanted to do. How did I implement it? This is the structure of the code you will also be able to check out after my talk, right? We have the Proto module, which is essentially just the service and the data that it exposes, and then we have the UI. The UI is split into 3 parts. That's the shared part, where the view model lives. The view model in this case takes care of the interaction with the data service, but also if we are loading or not. And since this is the same functionality we need between the XR part and the classic 2D part, I put it into a shared package. And then we have something like the Sky Post view, which is the composable that shows us the post we just had, right? So like with the image, the name, the author, and the text. That's also inside the shared. And then we have 2 parts. The classic one is again, how we know it, our composables in there for classic Android development. And then we have the XR part doing things specifically. In order to differentiate, we need in the main activity in this case to find out whether we are running in the XR mode or if we are running in classic. In order to find this out, there is a local spatial capabilities current. You can just ask, hey, am I in spatial UI enabled or not? If the spatial UI is enabled, it's the clunk for saying, hey, I'm actually in XR mode, please render everything in XR, whatever this means. And if this is not set, well, then I just use the classic composables for the app as am I used to. And And if I'm going for the XR part, I can also use similar methodologies as I'm used to the classic part, right? So there's something like a spatial column. Now, remember, spatial, this means we have everything in 3D, right? So we have a row, we have a column, we have a depth. So we have one dimension more, but from the looks of it, this could also be general UI with a composable, right? It is a composable, but the classic composed UI. We have now subspace modifiers, because again, in space, things are three-dimensional. So if we're saying fill max size, it fills the depth, the width, and the height. And then we have panels, right? So with the spatial column, it's a column in space, kind of imaginative there. But then we have to put our views into a spatial panel. A panel is a cutout of the space where I can put my 2D composables on. In this case, I'll put a surface there, and the surface contains my post view. The surface is there so that I have something as a background for the post. I could also leave the surface out, but I just wanted to have a bit of white before I'm starting with the actual post view. And now I'm in XR, right? So as I was saying, the post view is the same as coming from the 2D part of the app. So I can just reuse it also in the XR part of my app without thinking too much about it. It's only important that it's part of a spatial panel. Inside a panel is where the translation happens from XR space to 2D space. And then since we are in 3D, obviously we have to do some math. In order to orient the posts in cylindrical space, you have to think about like, okay, what's the x and z and y coordinate, right? For clarification, x is this one, z is this one, and y goes up. So if we are following like the fifth line or something, if I know in which angle the current post is, I can determine the x, the z, and the y position, easily following the math up there. But also what I found very fascinating is something called normalized angle cosinus. I have not encountered this one. This is essentially a shorthand for the cosine, which runs from 0 to 1, because they have a lookup table where it's easier to look up the cosine than using the classic math. So this speeds up the code. I don't know, I have not made any comparison there, but I just found this a nice little information on the side. If I use those cosine and sine functions, I have the position on the current ring, and then I just have to update the y position to, hey, where am I currently? What is my current index of the post I'm rendering? And based on like how many posts I want to have per round, I can easily calculate the height. And then once I have this one, I tell it the spatial panel. Again, the spatial panel is the thing that holds our 2D graphics, so to say, or our 2D composables in there, and I need to give the panel the position and the rotation in 3D space in order to make it available in XR. And I do this by using the spatial modifiers for offset and rotation. And nicely also done here, it's very user-friendly to use the offset because it's just x, y, dp coordinates similar to we are knowing in 2D space. But also the rotation comes in the three flavors we know. It's the quaternion, it's an axis angle rotation, and it's the yaw pitch roll. So like depending on what is easier for you to visualize how I want to rotate the object, you can take one of the three. Yeah, so that's cat pictures for you once again. Once you've applied all of this one, you can easily swap from the 2D content to the 3D content. And I'm just happy to go to the parts that I encountered that weren't as easy as I was hoping for. So for instance, you can do random things, right? If you're not sure about your math, probably you get something like the center image where it's just like, okay, is this now plus -1 or is it minus 275? You know, a bit of math and a piece of paper next to your computer is very helpful there. If you remember Cardboard or Daydream and you have your current YouTube app, you can still put your YouTube videos into Cardboard or Daydream. I was hoping that something smart happens already, but we are not there yet. If you're doing it on YouTube, you will get the last image. So you see a left and a right image transposed into something that you could put into a Cardboard or a Daydream, but it doesn't work with XR. And please don't ask me how I got the first image. There was just something with resetting the virtual camera that made it like kind of upside down and on space. Yeah, if you're doing random things will happen. And with this one, I have my link tree under my own website there. Please feel free to type it in. You will find the slides there, a link to the source code and more. And I'm happy to go through the code or anything else I can do for you right now with this exploration. Thank you so much.